everyone, my name is Lainey McWilliams and I will be talking to you about specific learning disability. So I decided to do a video because with my last class with Dr. Smith last semester, I tried doing the audio and I had to put it on my Google Drive. And even though I gave permission to Dr. Smith to view it, it still would not let her do it. So I decided to do the video component this time. I'm sorry the lighting looks a little weird. I have a really old house that was my grandparents', so sometimes the lights are kind of in weird places, and if you can see back there, right here, we don't have a light in our living room, because for some reason my grandparents preferred lamps instead. So, let's get started. And I apologize if it looks like I'm looking really random places. I'm staring at my computer screen, but how the camera is, it might seem a little strange. Alright, so a specific learning disability, what it is and what it is not. So this learning disability is one or more of the basic psychological, so in your brain, processes involved in understanding or using language, which is spoken or it can be written. This could show in your ways that you listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. It does not include a result of a visual, hearing, or fine motor or gross motor disability, emotional disturbance, cultural factors, environmental or economic disadvantage, or limited English proficiency. We have several Spanish-speaking students, and just because they're struggling doesn't mean they're SLD in English. It's just because their first language is Spanish. Signs and symptoms. So there can be hard to discriminate between letters and sounds, poor reading and or writing ability, reversing their letters, placing letters in incorrect sequences, and difficulty sounding out words. This could be related also to dyslexia. There's a lot more dyslexic students than it was realized. My mom was actually the dyslexia specialist for my school district several years ago before she retired and then became my babysitter. And a lot of students who they thought were maybe specific learning disability in reading or writing actually turned out to have dyslexia. It also can show inability to discriminate between numerals, difficulty telling time and knowing left from right, having difficulty recognizing patterns and placing things in order, losing track when counting, and needing visual aids like your fingers to help count. It can also show up as difficulty following directions, being restless, impulsive. It is probably just because their students are struggling and they don't know what to do, so they're going to sit there and maybe start to cause some trouble. They might say one thing and mean another, difficult to discipline, and they can be disorganized. The prevalence, so in the research that I looked up on DESE, it said there was 14,899 special education students reported to DESE. Of this number, 30,755 students were categorized as specific learning disability. Now, this is the percentage of disabilities in my high school. So I don't believe any of these kids really overcrossed, like they weren't autism with a secondary diagnosis of, say, language impairment. So 22% were SLD, specific learning disability, 41% were other health impaired, 25% were language impairment, 4% were intellectually disabled, 6% was autism, and 2% were emotionally disturbed. Just to give you a bit of a understanding of that number, we have one student who is considered emotionally disturbed, 2 students then who are intellectually disabled, 3 who are autistic, and so on and so forth. Those are the numbers. I'm not quite sure as they get higher what those numbers actually broke down to. Then I went down and I broke down the SLD, specific learning disabilities, categories in my high school. Keep in mind, some of these can overlap. Some students had multiple ones. We had 0 with listening comprehension. I teach applied English, and all of my kids seem to do better listening than reading the material themselves. 9% were oral expression, 9% were mathematics calculations, written expression, basic reading skills, reading comprehension, mathematics problem solving, and then 73% were reading fluency. Several years ago, a lot of the kids were diagnosed, if they didn't make progress in Tier 3, then they were just automatically put in SPED and labeled SLD and reading fluency. Some of these students usually would test out in middle school, but some of them have stayed through and worked their way through high school with this. Reading accommodations and modifications, having large print, you can make the text font larger, so instead of using maybe 18-point font, you use 38. I have a younger cousin who has nystagmus, so he has to have large print tests because the small print he cannot see well enough. Read aloud. A teacher or para may read the test aloud to students. This will help the students move along more efficiently. And sometimes like, oh no, I don't need it read. And then they don't. And then they bomb the test because they could barely read it to understand it. And reduction of answer choices. So you could do, if you read a comprehension passage, for example, and it has questions, you can maybe slash a choice off. Students only have to answer 5 of the 8 questions. Math, graph paper, you could give that to the students so they can keep their numbers in line. Use of calculators. This is so students can maybe not be able to do their math facts like that. It'll help them move along so they're keeping pace. And a cheat sheet. This would be probably more of a modification. I know our para who does all of our math classes will usually give the students examples on a cheat sheet of similar problems, or they may have examples lined out too. And then as far as writing goes, I don't believe I put a slide in this on my presentation, but you can shorten paragraphs, also shorten sentences. This will help allow for students not have to maybe not write as much, or students who struggle to get their thoughts from their mind on paper out. So that is all about SLD. Thank you for watching.